Listen, there's a lot of jutsu in the Naruto world, and many of them are relatively easy to explain, in that most of them are either one or a combination of 2 or even 3 chakra releases. Fireball jutsu, you gotta use fire release. Chidori, lightning release. And if you want to get super complicated, you can use a Keke Todo, which is a combination of 3 different chakra natures, like particle release, which is earth, wind, and fire. And no, not like the people who sang Do You Remember? But there is one jutsu that is widely used that is very specific and not like any other jutsu out there. And I'm not talking Thousand Years of Death. No, because today we are talking about puppet technique. A staple in the Land of Wind for over 3 generations, and yet we seem to know so little about it. So today, you're gonna learn everything that I know. Before the lesson starts, ladies and gentlemen, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you're feeling particularly saucy, maybe you can hit that join button, get access to 3 additional videos a month from me. These videos can range from anything from Naruto videos that are too short for me to make into full YouTube videos, or vlogs like the trip I just took with that girlfriend you just saw walk by. Or you could get access to my newest video coming out where me and my best friend choose anime tattoos for each other and then get them done. But just remember, guys, if you're not in a situation where joining is something that you can do comfortably, there is no correct way to support a creator. I just appreciate you being here right now. So the puppet technique, one of the most perplexing, confusing, but yet interesting jutsus we see used in Naruto. How did it start? How was it used? Who's the strongest user of it? All great questions, but we're gonna start at the beginning. But the problem is, the beginning is kind of hazy. Puppeteering was created twice, once by the Otsutsukis and once by humans. But for the sake of making things linear and also less confusing, let's talk about the Otsutsuki tidbit at the end, and let's talk about human puppeteering right now. Modern puppeteering, as we know, was made by Monzaemon Chikamatsu, who was from the Hidden Sand. You see, Monzaemon was a playwright in the Hidden Sand and would use these puppets as a source of entertainment for the people of the Hidden Sand. What's cool about this, though, is Monzaemon Chikamatsu in Japanese history is a playwright. He lived between 1653 and 1725. And he's actually regarded as the Japanese Shakespeare, as the greatest playwright in Japan's history. And what's actually even cooler than that is he wrote 2 different kinds of theater. He wrote kabuki style theater, which was meant for adults. Kabuki style is a Japanese dance drama with performative makeup and over elaborate scenes. But beyond kabuki style, he also wrote a different, more specific type of theater. He also wrote Jarui theater, which is puppet theater. So it's fairly obvious where Kishimoto got the motivation for Monzaemon Chikamatsu in Naruto. It's like if they had just slapped a character in called Shakespeare and had him write stories that later became a jutsu. Or like if Sai's Ninja Beast Scroll had been taught to him by a guy named Da Vinci. But in the world of Naruto, nothing stays pure for long. And after the first Great Ninja War, the Hidden Sand had realized it needed to buff its military power. Specifically, the second Kazekage, Shamon, realized this. You see, the Hidden Sand suffers from being one of the lesser populated shinobi villages, and therefore losing shinobi in battle is more detrimental to them than it is to a city like Konoha. So Shamon wanted to be able to bolster the military strength, but also lose less soldiers. And it was at this point that he saw Monzaemon's puppets. So Monzaemon worked diligently with a bunch of shinobi, because Monzaemon loved the Hidden Sand, it's where he did his theater, to make these puppets combat ready. And this was achieved by making the puppet technique. Puppet technique is essentially just replacing the traditional strings on a puppet with chakra threads, because chakra threads are both unsliceable, reattachable, and can extend. So now that Monzaemon had worked with all the shinobis, he had a technique. And it was at this point that he began to build a collection of combat puppets. And while it is widely believed that he had dozens, why wouldn't he? He was the first ever puppeteer. He had 10 very important puppets. These 10 puppets made up the white secret technique, the Chikamatsu collection of 10 puppets. These puppets were so strong that they were theorized to be able to take down an entire castle by themselves. And this is because they were specifically made to work together. A specific circumstance we see where these puppets work together is the 3 jewels suction crushing technique, where 3 of the puppets come together to suck in everything around them and destroy it. I mean, these puppets were so strong, they were able to take on Sasori's 100 puppets. Each of these puppets is controlled with 1 chakra string from each of your 10 fingers, and therefore it is very hard to pull them off in a coordinated fashion. I mean, think about it, your average puppeteer has 1 puppet to hand. Now, it's not entirely clear how Granny Chiyo ended up with these puppets, but it can be assumed that because Monzaemon was older than Granny Chiyo, belonging to the generation before her, that he saw her as his logical successor. In wanting the Hidden Sand to stay strong, he bequeathed his greatest accomplishment, his strongest puppets, to the next generation's strongest puppet master. And clearly this was a good idea because puppet mastery became so popular in the hidden sand, an entire puppet brigade was created. This puppet brigade was made to find new ways to use these puppets in combat. Because yeah, sure, Monzaimon can find a way to make incredibly powerful puppets, but we need to make that reproducible. Because like I said earlier, puppets acted as replacement shinobi in the Land of Sand. One person could be controlling 10 shinobi, and therefore there would be more fighting power on the battleground for the hidden sand, even though they had less people, because they could not afford to lose the kind of shinobi that Konoha or the Hidden Cloud could. So now that we've talked about why and how they were created, let's talk about how they work on a deeper level. So we've already established that by connecting chakra threads that are emitted from your fingertips to the puppet, you can control them with finger movements. But why do some people use 2 puppets for 2 hands, but others use 100? Well, it's all about experience. See, a fledgling puppet master has to use all 10 fingers to control one puppet. But as time progresses, puppet masters are able to figure out how to control a puppet with less than 10 threads, getting to the point where they can control up to 10 usually. See, 10 puppets, 1 for each finger, is the soft cap for your average puppet master. But obviously in cases like Sasori's, you're able to use 100 because he was probably the best puppet master of all time outside of Granny Chiyu. And while controlling 100 shinobi level threats sounds awesome, there is a couple of drawbacks. These puppets aren't being controlled through telekinesis. There is a string that is emitting controls to that puppet from a user. And because of this, there is an inevitable lag between the control output from the user and the actual action being performed with the puppet. And this gets worse with the amount of distance between the controller and the puppet. So puppet masters will have to strike where they think their opponent is going to be as opposed to where they are. And understanding this time lag is what makes a puppet master truly great. On top of this, controlling 1 puppet is tough, but controlling up to 10 is almost impossible. And because this is so tough, puppet masters have to keep a constant focus on all of their puppets. And while it may not seem like the most chakra depletive thing out there, maintaining these chakra threads to each and every single one of these puppets is very chakra depletive. This makes puppet masters incredibly vulnerable should you get around their puppets. Even more so when you take into the account that most puppet masters aren't traditionally trained in taijutsu, making them more or less sitting ducks. So puppeteers are usually required to either keep a massive distance from their opponents, which increases lag to your puppets, or hide. But there is some countermeasures to this. Look at Sasori, for example. Sasori created 2 defensive puppets that were meant to have the puppet master inside of them. These puppets are Sanshuo and Hiriko. Sanshuo was created by Sasori and then passed down to Chakra, and it is quite literally a salamander, which is what Sanshuo means in Japanese. It is big enough that it's supposed to have the puppet master and up to 2 other people inside of it for a defensive measure. It is a tail that swings in the back to keep people from attacking the back, and it is an iron cloak that defends its entire body from all angles. A puppet like this is meant to allow the puppet master to be close to his other puppets. There's also Hiriko, the puppet that everyone thought Sasori was for a long time. This puppet was actually made from a renowned shinobi that Sasori killed and was his favorite puppet. This puppet was essentially an iron shell that Sasori sat in so he could control his other puppets in a safe place. It had an extendable tail that could attack and slice enemies that got too close, rapid launching senbon from its mouth, a torpedo left arm that could shoot senbon in all directions. All of these countermeasures to make sure that Sasori could be close to the puppets he was puppeteering. Fun facts about the name Hiriko though, it is an alternative name for the Japanese fisherman god Ebisu. I don't know what that has to do with literally anything, but now you know. There's also a misconception about Hiriko that says that he was Sasori's 18th puppet. But that's only because the word ohaku, which is favorite in Japanese, literally translates to 18. He was Sasori's 11th puppet actually. But puppet masters will go even further than making a defensive puppet that they sit inside of. Granny Chiyu actually kind of made herself a puppet. Granny Chiyu replaced one of her arms with mechanical light block shield, which is a shield that opens up from the arm of a puppet and emits chakra in a shield type form. This shield is strong enough to block iron sand. So should you get too close to Granny Chiyu and try to attack her, she can use this shield to block you. And Kankuro will disguise his puppets as himself so people attack the puppet and then don't see him coming. But let's say you don't have a puppet or you lose a puppet, the chakra threads themselves are still very much a problem for your opponent. If you're fighting somebody, you can attach your chakra threads to them, you can trip them up or even control control their bodies. It's like shadow possession jutsu, but you don't need the shadows. You can even connect threads to somebody's body without them noticing. You can use a minimal amount of chakra, makes the threads very thin, attach that to somebody, and then whenever you want to control them, make those threads big. And chakra threads can be used a lot like shadows. Since we're talking about them, you can attach a chakra thread to a kunai, throw it, and then that makes it an easy way to attach it to an enemy from a distance away. Or you can use your chakra thread to throw a kunai at a weird angle that your enemy wouldn't see coming. With all this taken into consideration, it's no surprise that the creation of puppet technique is one of the things that catapulted the hidden sand to the forefront of shinobi power. They now had a full brigade of people who could use up to 10 puppets as replacement for shinobi, effectively almost making their army 10 times bigger. I know that's not how the math works, but I'm not going to break it down. And this was obviously very important because that was one of the only things that the hidden sand could do to bolster its economy. They weren't going to start growing oranges, it's all sand. So the ideologies of the second and the third Kazekages was make this village as strong as possible so we get signed on for shinobi missions, which were a thing that Konoha was stealing all of because their military might was both so impressive and cheaply available. They didn't actually create puppet mastery. Nope. That was the Otsutsuki. And the worst part is, the Otsutsukis was way better. Otsutsukis have an ability to control other people remotely from any distance away. Yeah. You heard me. They could be on the moon, you could be on Earth. They can control you. But how were they able to do this? Was it like how Nagato controlled the 6 paths of pain with his chakra rods? And it's sort of like that, except the Otsutsuki don't have to be stabbed into a large metal throne. In the novelization of Naruto the Last, the only canon Naruto movie, where Naruto goes to the moon to fight the last living Otsutsuki who spun out of Hamura's clan who stole Hinata in order to activate the Tenseigan. It's really good. You should watch it if you haven't seen it. But yeah, this information wasn't in the movie, it was in the novel. But yeah, essentially we found out that Otsutsukis can place an orb of chakra into their puppets, which are usually humans, that allows them to control these humans and or puppets from any distance using thoughts alone. And the Otsutsuki actually became so good at this puppeteering that eventually these puppets became autonomous, meaning that the Otsutsuki didn't even need thought to control these puppets because they simply did what the Otsutsuki wanted without conscious effort being funneled from the Otsutsuki. So yeah, they're basically just powerful robots that you can control from any distance and do exactly what you want without ever having to ask for it. A little different from what Kankuro's doing. The only problem is that these puppets need the Tenseigan to power their movements. Think of the Tenseigan a bit like Tony Stark's core reactor. Powerful, but unstable. And this is actually one of the reasons that's not explored in the movie that Toneri wants the Tenseigan to continue being powered up. He doesn't want to lose his robot butlers. And if I had robot butlers, I wouldn't want to lose them either. And actually, fun fact, in Gaara Hiden, Gaara's light novel, where he tries to get a wife and then she tries to murder him, Gaara doesn't have exactly what you would call luck. Kankuro studies the report of these Otsutsuki puppets, and he's actually able to achieve something somewhat similar to their puppeteering, essentially by using imperceptibly small chakra threads. Kankuro is able to pilot his puppets from a distance that is unheard of before that. And while these puppets are not autonomous, it allows Kankuro to be as far from his puppet as any puppet master has ever been and still control them cohesively, which, when like you're not a god, is still a pretty good achievement. That brings me to who is the strongest puppet master of all time. Now, there's only 5 manga canon puppet users: Chiyo, Kankuro, Monzaimon, Shamon, and Sasori. And while Shamon was the second Kazekage, he was very new in the world of puppeteering. He was one of the people who worked with Monzaimon to make puppets into shinobi. So more likely than not, he wasn't the strongest ever puppet user. And you could say the same thing about Monzaimon. Obviously, his 10 puppets were used to destroy Sasori's 100 puppets, but they were used by Granny Chiyo. Kankuro's great, but I think we have to take him out of this conversation because, let's be real, I don't think he would out-puppet Sasori or Granny Chiyo, which brings us down to Sasori and Granny Chiyo. Sasori's feats are terrifying. I mean, he killed the third Kazekage and made him into a puppet. The third Kazekage, who was said to be the strongest ever Kazekage, by the way. I mean, in the anime, he's able to beat back Orochimaru, who, by the way, had used Edo Tensei to bring the third Kazekage back to life. And while it may seem clear and obvious to choose Sasori because of his on-screen feats, Granny Chiyo off-screen feats make Sasori's on-screen feats look like child's play. Granny Chiyo was able to carry the Land of Wind through 2 separate wars. Granny Chiyo went toe-to-toe with Hanzo the Salamander several times in the Second Great Shinobi World War. And while she didn't kill him, not losing to him is saying something. Because in the Second Great Shinobi World War, Hanzo beat the 3 legendary Sannin together after after he beat their entire platoon. He also beat back the entirety of the Hidden Stone and the Land of Wind. In fact, she was such a proficient killer that Tsunade's entire mission in the Second Great Shinobi World War was counteracting the thousands of individual and incurable poisons she had created. Not to mention for a fact that in her late 80s, she was able to defeat Sasori in a fight, and yes, you can say Sakura was there, but who was controlling Sakura? You can also say that Sasori wanted to die and kind of did unalive himself in the end of that fight, but that's neither here nor there. Peak Granny Chiyo was a nation-level threat. And I'm not saying Sasori wasn't close to that, but come on. She's the one who trained him. And that's it. That's all we got on puppeteering. A lot of this information is from very deep in the knowledge wells of Naruto, so I hope you guys learned something new that you hadn't learned yet. And if you did, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you really like this video, go ahead and hit that join button for access to 3 additional videos like the one coming out soon about me and my girlfriend's vlog in Hawaii, or the video coming out after that about me and my best friend choosing anime tattoos for each other. You can say you don't want to be a puppet master, but it's kind of nice to not be the one getting punched in the face.